Thank you. I was thinking, as Gillian is using her family for her examples, I can start this one by talking about, this is what we call philosophic understanding. We have, I can't remember how many children, but there's a lot of them around. But two of them I used to take to soccer. Particularly during times when there were elections in Vancouver. Of course, everybody would have the lawn signs out and things. And there was a point when the younger one, we had the youngest and oldest are boys. There were some girls and things in there as well, and I can't remember how. But anyway, the youngest one, say when he was 12, and the oldest one then would have been about 16. No, that can't be right. But anyway, 13 and 16. With the 5 children in between, I think. I can't remember how it goes. The kinds of questions the youngest would ask about the lawn signs would be things like, whose side are we on? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? It was very much what we classify here as a romantic approach, or even younger. We want the good and the bad, the conflicting, and what was it about our guys that was so good, and why were they villainous? Why were the other guys so bad, and so we try to answer in appropriately sophisticated ways. But the older boy would say things like, why would anybody change their vote because there are a bunch of lawn signs? What the hell? I mean, if you believe something, what does the fact there's a lot of lawn signs do to changing your mind about anything? And this is, do you pay to have a sign on your lawn, or do they pay you? So we started talking about how it worked, how the lawn sign stuff worked in relation to political parties and how the parties worked and how democracy functioned. So what you can see happening between the two, or the difference between the two, is the kind of association that they have with what's actually going on, that the way they're making sense of it is quite different. And the older boy is beginning to develop a whole language connected with democracy, society, politics, and these terms that the younger one could give you a definition, but the older boy was suddenly beginning to realize these were the terms to think in to make best sense of what was actually going on around you. So there's a sense in which he was developing what we're calling here a philosophic understanding. He was developing a language, a theoretic language, that gives us a new way of thinking about the world around us. So once you start thinking theoretically, you leave behind the more romantic approach. You can see it in the way sometimes maps work. If you've been to if you ever go to Europe particularly, but also it's happened here, certain kinds of maps, they represent things as though you're looking for a mile up and a half a mile away, so that you get the buildings drawn in little. So you've got a kind of pictorial representation, a bit like zooming in on Google Earth. You go right down. At one level, you get a map that is totally abstracted. The value of the abstracted map, the road map of Vancouver, doesn't have the picture stuff in it. But what it does is give you a power to find your way around that is entirely due to its abstraction from the reality. That is, it leaves out everything except the features that are important to give you that overview that you require to just find your way around among things. So that's something of what's happening when we develop a theoretic language. We learn a much more sophisticated, more powerful toolkit for making sense of our world. And moving towards it is a recognition that the world that we'd earlier seen as, if you think of history, for example, at the romantic sense, you're interested in who are the heroes, who are doing the great deeds, why is the comma the source of democracy. These kinds of ideas are very dramatic and powerful, and we grab onto these bright bits and pieces, as it were. But at the philosophic level, we want to see history as a whole, a single process. We begin to ask, are things getting better or worse? Is history a tragic process in which we're going to hell in a handcart? We can't breathe the air, and we can't, etc., etc. Or things are gradually getting better all the time. So we want to see history and society and our personalities in terms of huge theoretical understanding, which is a quite different way of making sense of things. Anyway, let me just talk about just a very few of these, because You tend to get it only with kids who've had generally a very academic background, who are interested in ideas. Now, we get this with all kinds of people in all kinds of circumstances, but you need an institution to support it. So unless there's a lot of constant support, which our schools don't tend to do terribly well, it doesn't develop very much, but it's there to be used and developed with our students. Sorry. So the first part of it, this is the set of tools. I don't think I go into these in detail. No. So this is the toolkit we've got. And the first is what we call a meta-narrative. That is, always when we're teaching almost anything, and particularly at the theoretic level, we want a story. But it's not going to be a once upon a time story, and it's not going to be the kind of simplest stories we've seen earlier about the eels and the adventure and all the rest of it. It's going to be a story that has to bring out the whole process. So we're calling it a meta-narrative. It's the theory. So whatever you're teaching has underlying it some very general theory. And the way into it for kids who are developing this philosophic understanding is what's the most powerful theory that brings together all the stuff that we're going to be dealing with. And if you're teaching in science, you might want to, certain areas, you say evolution is a terrific, huge, big idea that has a lot of power to explain a great deal of stuff. So the kids become fascinated first by the most general theory. The way science, for example, is taught in universities, I think often is catastrophic in that they have these huge classes and they decide the thing to do is to teach the kids all the basic facts, because only when you've done that for 3 years can you actually then deal with the theories. But it works exactly the other way around pedagogically, that if you want to engage the kids, you start with what's the really big, powerful theory that's at the bottom of all this, and then they're excited to find the facts that give that theory some body. So they build their factual knowledge to give power to the theories that they already have begun to develop. So we're starting, because that's where the emotion lies. It's in the big theory that we have some emotional engagement. The next is what here is called the craving for generality. That's a quote from Wittgenstein. The fascination is always with what's the most general idea that is a part of whatever it is I'm teaching. And it's a reflection of the big theory, but it's a different way of having a take on it. What fascinates the student at this stage is suddenly they have this recognition that the world is made up of these enormously powerful movements and ideas and beliefs, so that you develop often metaphysical beliefs, beliefs about the nature of history, beliefs about your identity, all these kinds of things develop quite quickly. A lot of people talk about it when I think St. Paul falls off his horse, and he talks about, earlier I saw as a child, but now I see as... And there's this sense that people have that suddenly with the development of these general ideas, they finally see the truth of things. So what they're after is the truth with a capital T. So you're interested in, what's the truth of physics? What's the truth of psychology? The truth of biology? The truth about, etc. So it's this drive to find these general truths and the belief that in these generalizations you capture the best way to make sense of the world around you. And what you become interested in then are not so much the bits and pieces, but it's the processes that tie them together. So we see, again, in history, it's not just, you're no longer interested in the facts of feudalism and the development of cities and all this sort of stuff, but you begin to see this, this is a part of the process whereby certain form of social life gives away and you get the development of a bourgeoisie. If you take a Marxist view, kids love, initially, the power of a Marxist theory of history is fantastic as a teaching tool, because they begin to see suddenly it's all about the development of these sets of social arrangements that then give rise to an opposing arrangement. So you've got the development of the bourgeoisie, which in turn gives rise to the development of the proletariat, and the proletariat, they fight the bourgeoisie. So you get this huge theory that explains everything. I mean, it doesn't just tell you about the meaning of all the events in the past, it tells you what the future is going to be like as well. Terrific as a tool for engaging kids. I'm not recommending that you use Marxism. I'm using this as an example of a big idea that has had immense power. And people who snap onto these think they've found the truth. And there's terrific excitement that typically comes with the development of these big theories, which you can do in any area that we teach about. And the way in which the process moves forward, because the way you teach once these things develop is a little bit differently. What the students do is they develop these general ideas, these general schemes, general theories about the world. And then what happens is they become quite excited to find the facts that support them. So they want to search out more and more facts that support their general idea. Now the trouble with that is that you constantly generate anomalies, things that don't fit your theory. The more you learn, the more you find your theory is inadequate. So what do you do? Well, one thing you do is start making your theory more sophisticated to account for the anomalies, the things that don't fit it. And of course, you then need to learn a lot more facts about, that support the theory. And of course, the more and more you learn, the more and more anomalies you generate. So you're constantly doing this dialectical move between developing an increasingly sophisticated theory that has to account for more and more anomalies. But to support that new theory, you have to develop more factual information that creates more anomalies. So you're in this constant problem that your theory, you discover in the end, is never adequate. Our theories are never adequate to the reality that they describe. It's a sad feature of human life, and which is the problem with something like Marxism. It's terrific and very exciting for a while until you then gradually, if you're teaching history, what you do with somebody who's developed a Marxist view is not to say, it's wrong because of the following 12 reasons. You say, well, why was it the case that in medieval or late medieval, early modern England, the aristocracy managed to survive with so much wealth? Because they should have been displaced by the bourgeois powers that then in turn should have been displaced by the proletariat, but the aristocracy in England has maintained their wealth in an astonishingly successful way, which the theory doesn't account for. So you then have to make it's not something that says the theory's wrong, it says that you need a more sophisticated theory to account for this anomaly. So the student works away and finds out more and more details to support their theory. So everything we teach has, as a part of it, big, powerful theories. And they're the way in for the student to get a grasp on all the detailed content that we want them to learn. And even if we think of our activities as very purely skill-based, look, I just want them to learn how to cook the bloody stuff, right, and not get it. But underlying that is, reasons why they can think about that activity as a part of a whole way of dealing with the professional world that they're a part of. That it's not, there's always sets of theories that underlie whatever it is we're teaching. And for many students, for some students, it will be the most exciting thing, the most exciting part of what they can do. But for us, we have to locate those things first again and teach in a way that brings it out. And just the example of history again. The other thing that's happening constantly with these things is not that the students are just developing these ideas, but they're beginning to see themselves as parts of these processes. They're learning about the process of history, the process of psychology. They suddenly realize that they're not above it in the way that at the romantic stage way of thinking, somehow you're above all this stuff. You're looking for the bright bits and pieces and the exciting things and the heroes and all the rest of it. But then you suddenly realize that you're not like the hero, like the Superman. You're more like Clark Kent. You're stuck you're caught in all these processes like as a spider in a web, but it's more like the fly in the spider's web, that we are a part of these processes. They've determined our identity. We're not above them. We are involved in them. And the great phrase is, I was born with a past. That is, we don't shape our own identity or destiny, we discover. We are caught in these nets of complex processes that we now can get power over our destiny by learning about them and developing theories about them. Anyway, it's good, clean fun. It keeps us off the streets. So, sorry. And this final one, just we'll touch very, final kind of understanding is what we call ironic, and that's the recognition that none of the theories are adequate. That this phrase, "'tis all in pieces, all coherence gone," that we can recognize with the decay of the theories that what we're stuck with is just our lives are made up of bits and pieces. They're made up of minutes. They're not made up of great schemes and meta theories. They're not, we laughingly describe our experience in terms of our career. Why are you here? Well, you make sense of it in terms of something to do with, a story, a meta that we tell ourselves. But the recognition of irony is that our lives are made up of moments. And it's the moments that are the reality that we deal with, not some great scheme that then justifies the moments. We're stuck with these little bits and pieces.